What's up guys, hope you're having a good day. I want to kick off this week's video by saying a big thank you to Jacqueline Cavalcanti who came through for us last week at UFC Paris. We said in last week's YouTube video that Cavalcanti would be a great bet against Nora Cornell because Cavalcanti was simply better than Cornell everywhere, and outside of some crazy hometown decision it was going to be very difficult for Cornell to win. So thankfully Cavalcanti got the job done, and hopefully you watched last week's YouTube video and tailed that bet. Don't worry if you didn't, we've got more bets coming for you in this YouTube video today. And like I say, over the long term, we do very, very well betting on the UFC, both live betting and pre-fight betting. So if you look at our profitability chart, you can see that over the long term, we've consistently made money. Of course, we've had dips along the way. Everybody does. But over the long term, there's a clear uptrend here on pre-fight bets. And what I want to start doing more of with this YouTube channel is just trying to help you guys understand kind of like my philosophy and approach to pre-fight betting, which will help you understand the reason why I've been able to consistently earn money pre-fight betting on the UFC over such a long period of time. My style of betting is very conservative, and it has evolved a lot and become more conservative over the years. I've tweaked my strategy multiple times. We made a tweak here, a tweak here, a tweak here. And over the long term, we continually evolve, but every time we evolve, we keep that uptrend going. We evolve with the betting market, we evolve with the sport, and we continue to make money. And you can see over the last 2 years, we've made about 30 units of profit pre-fight bet in the UFC, which is very good because I don't actually place that many bets. As you know, I'm very conservative. We do have some bets in this video. And the reason why I want to change the direction a little bit for this channel and try and help you guys understand my philosophy and my approach to pre-fight betting on the UFC, which enables me to make profits consistently over such a long period of time, dating back, these results are dated back to November 2013, is because we're in really tough economic times, right? People are starting to lose their jobs, the cost of living's crazy, our governments are consistently making our countries a worse place to live every year, and everyone's struggling financially. It's very, very difficult times. Now, gambling is never a solution to financial problems. Gambling is never something that you should turn to if you're running into problems with money, because gambling is fraught with risk. Even if you look at our pre-fight betting chart here, there's plenty of dips, catastrophic dips, big dips, right? Over the long term, we consistently grind up and we've got a very nice uptrend. But from week to week, month to month, day to day, we don't know what's going to happen. And obviously, if you don't manage risk correctly during these dips, you can lose all your money. And that's definitely not what we want. Even if you look at our live betting chart, live betting is my bread and butter, is what I specialize in. I perform very well on live betting over the years, but again, there's little dips here and there. Not as many with live betting, but definitely dips in gambling. It's inevitable. So it is important to gamble responsibly. But the way I look at it is, if you're watching these videos, you're going to be placing bets anyway. And so hopefully, with the information that I share with you guys in this video, that's backed up by hours and hours and hours and hours of research, and as you can see, over 10 years of experience, and trust me, I was making money betting on the UFC a good few years before I even set my website and started tracking bets. We do great, whether it's both pre-fight betting on the UFC, live betting on the UFC, doesn't really matter. It is funny to me that if I, talk about a bet on YouTube that loses, for weeks or months or even years, people hound me in the comment section about these losses. But literally, if we win a bet like last week on Cavalcanti, it is crickets and no one mentions it, which I do find pretty funny. But that's the way the world works, right? People love watching fire burn. People love to tear others down. But ultimately, what we know is that I've been doing this a very long time. We're very good at it, and we do consistently make profits every single year through hard work and spend a lot of time researching these fights, man. So hope you're going to find today's research summaries useful, and we've definitely got some bets cooking from for this week's card. Before we get into that though, I do want to get your help with something, because many of you will know I'm a massive dog lover. You can see here, this was Caesar. This was my baby boy. He was my Shih Tzu. He was my first dog personally. Like, my parents had dogs and stuff growing up, but Caesar was my first ever dog, and he died earlier this year. You can see him running with my son here. He died earlier this year. He was 13, which was devastating. Very, very hard to deal with. And then a few months ago, we've got a new dog called Kiko. She's a Shiba Inu. You guys know I love crypto, so I thought we'll go with the crypto dog. We'll go with the Shiba Inu. So she's incredible. She's my daughter. I love her to bits. But she's also the friendliest, most loving dog I've ever met in my life. Here you can see me taking her for a walk. There's me doing the cringy Instagram post. And there's me looking not so cringy. Actually, my wife just sticking a phone in my face and taking a picture when she was a baby. But anyway, I digress. If you, my missus has set up an Instagram profile for our dog Kiko. It's a little bit strange, I get it. But if you want to follow that for whatever reason, I'll leave a link in the description below. That's not the purpose of me talking about Kiko, though. The purpose of me talking about Kiko is she's the friendliest, most loving dog I've ever met in my life. She's unbelievable. She just loves people. She loves other dogs. She's just very friendly. She wants to play all the time. She's amazing. So I'd never really thought of getting 2 dogs before. Getting 2 dogs is not something that was ever on my radar. But she just wants to play all the time. And I spend a lot of time playing with her, like, you know, because I don't really want to ever turn her away or say no. That's a pretty dick move. But obviously at the same time she is taking a lot of our time, so we're going to buy her a friend, man. We're going to buy her a brother. So we've actually reserved another Shiba Inu. Here he is. He's only 4 weeks old, and in the UK, I'm not sure if other countries are the same, but in the UK we can't collect him till he's 8 weeks old. So we're going to be picking him up around about October 30th, and I can't wait. He's incredible. He's a black and tan Shiba to go with our traditional looking red Shiba. And it's going to be a friend for Kiko. And I've never had 2 dogs before, and I've never thought of having 2 dogs in the past. But I need your guys' help because we're struggling for a name badly. He's a boy, and we just can't think of any names. Personally, I want to call him Rampage. I think Rampage is a great name. I just think it's kind of funny because Shibas are crazy dogs. If you know anything about dogs, they're kind of crazy. And obviously, it's an MMA reference after Rampage Jackson. I love Rampage. So I just thought Rampage a cool name. The missus isn't having it. She's like, you can't call a dog Rampage because when you take him to the vets and stuff, it's going to be awkward when they ask what his name is. I think it's brilliant. Can't think of anything better than calling Rampage across a busy public park for him to come back to us. But she's not having the name Rampage. So I need you to do 2 things for me. First of all, let me know if you'd like the name Rampage, if you think the name Rampage suits him, if you think we should call him Rampage. And the second thing I need you to do, because the missus probably isn't going to let me call him Rampage, leave in the comments below some name ideas because we are struggling. Like, we've gone to Google searches, we're asking ChatGPT, we're doing all this stuff, and we're struggling to come up with names for him. So please leave in the comments below any name suggestions for our new family member. I can't wait for him to arrive. Get emotional thinking about it. I can't wait. I love dogs. I'm a massive dogs person. They say dogs are mankind's greatest gifts, and I would agree with that. They are just the purest, kindest, most loving creatures on earth, and Kiko's incredible. So I'm looking forward to adding another dog to the family pretty soon. So let me know in the comments below. Help me out. Hook us up with some names. I would really appreciate it. So I said what I really want to do with this channel moving forward is just try and help people more. Okay, so I'm not going to change the way that I bet on fights. I'm not going to do anything differently, but I just want to, I guess I've been doing this a long time. I don't know how much more I'm going to be doing this. So I guess I would just like to maybe go out with a bang, help as many people as possible, and maybe not only just like spoon feed you guys the bets, but as perhaps I move on to the next chapter, would be cool to just kind of help you guys understand my approach to pre-fight betting on the UFC, maybe eventually my approach to live betting on the UFC when the end does really come close, but I'm not close for another maybe 2-3 years yet. There's some time left. There's some time left in this game for me yet. So yeah, I want to use these videos as just like not necessarily spoon feeding you the bets. Of course, I'll share you bets, but I want to also educate you guys on how I've been able to do this over such a long period of time, so that when I'm gone, you know, you've got that knowledge. It's kind of like that thing, right, where it's like, give a man a fish, you'll feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, you'll feed him for a lifetime. So that's what I want to do. But first of all, we need to kick things off with bets, right? Because in these YouTube breakdown videos every week, as you guys know, I don't have time to break down the whole card. It takes me too damn long to research. I spend a lot of time researching these fights, and ultimately that is because my bread and butter is live betting on the UFC. The way I make so much money over the long term live betting on the UFC is I research the fights. I spend a lot of time researching the fights so that when the fight's taking place, I can kind of see into the future and predict what will happen based on what has happened in the past fights of the two fighters competing. And so if we look at this week's research schedule, I've still got 3 fights to research for this week's card, which means obviously I can't break down the whole card on this YouTube video, because if I did, well, it wouldn't be out till Saturday, which doesn't help anybody. So we're only going to be breaking down the main card fights in this YouTube video. But if you do want to watch the breakdown videos for all the other fights on this card, all the prelims, obviously check out my website, mabettingtips.com. I'll leave a link for that in the description below. And if you want to join the live betting group and make a profit most weeks, then the link for that is also in the description below. You'll love live betting. If you've never really considered it, give my group a try. You'll like it a lot. But anyway, back into talking about bets for this week's card. So we got a couple things to think about and talk about before we even really get to talking about the breakdowns for this week's fights, because there are some interesting things going on the prelims, which I think you guys should consider. You also need your help with something. So you've seen the title and the thumbnail of the video is titled Pennington Parlay, right? Now, am I talking about parlaying both Penningtons, Raquel and Tecia? I'm not really, if I'm honest with you. I'm talking about something else. So the first thing that I want to talk about is a bet on Tecia Pennington, which has nothing to do with the parlay. And I'll talk about the parlay in a minute. But basically, boys, it's as simple as this. Carla Esparza is fighting Tecia Pennington this weekend. I don't have time to break this fight down on YouTube, but you can watch all the prelim breakdowns over on my website. Link in the description below. But I will say this. Carla Esparza has announced that this is her retirement fight this weekend. Now, what I can tell you, just like when fighters fight with staff, or, you know, there's a big age gap in a fight, or a big reach differential in a fight, or fighters come back off long layoffs, yada, 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 there's certain strong trends in MMA. One of the strongest trends is the fighters almost always lose in their retirement fight. Almost always. It's very, very, very rare that a fighter will win their retirement fight. And if they do win, it's usually because they've been given either an extremely favourable stylistic matchup, which this isn't for Carla, or they're also fighting someone that is kind of at the tail end of their career, and it's kind of a good old-fashioned WWE loser leaves town matchup, which I don't think this is, because Tecia's actually looking better than ever, even though they're around about the same age. So, like I say, if you want to watch my breakdown video for this fight, link in the description below. Check out mabettingtips.com. But I think Carla's worth a look this week. I think Tecia's worth a look this week. If Tecia does lose this week, it doesn't really matter, because playing strong trends like this over the long term will produce a profit long term, as long as you get a decent margin of value in the odds, right? But if we look at the odds on Tecia, where are you, Tecia? So the odds on Tecia say around about 1.56. That gives her, or that 1.56 odds minus 179. That's an implied probability of 64%. I can tell you right now that fighters that are fighting someone that is retiring win a lot more frequently than 64% of the time. So you've got value there, right? If Tecia was in Kayla Harrison territory, it would be different. But she isn't. So I'm not, you know, just consider it. Go do your own research, all that kind of stuff. And if Tecia does win, you know, be sure not to leave a YouTube comment, because when I do recommend winning bets, no one ever says dick. If I ever recommend a losing one, people go on about it for fucking months. So anyway, it's quite funny. No one cares that Cavalcanti won last week. I'm sure no one will care if Tecia wins this week either. But that is one to keep an eye on. And like I say, if you want my breakdown video for that fight, check out my website, MMABettingTips.com. Don't have time to go into it now, because I'd be here for hours. I'm probably going to be here for hours anyway. But check it out. So that's the first thing to talk about, where I'm just trying to, like, you know, at the end of the day, we make such good returns considering, you know, relative the number of bets we place. So 30 units of profit over the last couple of years. We're doing all right, boys. And I've been doing this a long time. I'm one of the very, very few... Well, I don't think anyone else has been around for as long as me. So I want to try and pass on as much of that knowledge to you guys as possible. Obviously, if you're not on my Discord yet, join the Discord. You can talk to me on a daily basis. And let's just all try and win, man. And, you know, just try and make life a little bit easier for us. I know what it feels like to be extremely broke. Extremely broke. When I started on this journey, God, going back 15 years, I started betting on the UFC to try and earn some extra money, because my son was born back in 2009. Terrible idea when you're broke to turn to gambling to try and fix the problem, but desperate times call for desperate measures, right? And when we are in desperate times, we don't always make the best decisions or think logically, but at the same time, I think that's what enabled me to develop the set of skills that I've developed, because failure really wasn't an option. You know, I had a newborn baby that I had to provide for, and I think that's why, you know, pretty early on I was able to become profitable betting on the UFC, because I worked so hard at figuring it out and cracking it, and that's the reason why I've been so successful over so long. So I want to help you guys out now in these tough financial times, tough economic times, to learn how to make money betting on the UFC in a safe and sustainable way, where you don't put yourselves at too much risk of getting wrecked. You know, gambling, you need to gamble responsibly. Gambling is a dangerous game to play. But if you come here and do things my way, you can see over the long term, nice, steady, consistent growth. Ups and downs for sure, but if you manage risk correctly, you will make money long term. With my philosophies and approaches towards all kinds of betting, pre-fight betting is obviously the one we talk about here. But whatever kind of betting it is, live betting the UFC, doesn't matter what it is. Anyway, so we will actually approach the Pennington parlay thing a little bit later on in the video. I'm not ready to get into that yet, because it relates to, obviously, the Raquel Pennington versus Julianna Pena fight. But I think now it's about time we get into breaking down these matchups. Let's start off with Alex Pereira versus Khalil Rountree. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, they've done that funny thing where they split the fights up into two boxes. You got to love it. Okay, here we go. So Alex Pereira is a 1.20 favourite, which is going to be minus 500 for an implied probability of 83%. If we take a look at the odds on Khalil Rountree, he's around an average of 4.55, which is going to be plus 355 for an implied probability of 22%. So Alex Pereira is 37 years old. He is 6'4" with an 80-inch reach. And Khalil Rountree is 34 years old, 6'1" with a 76.5-inch reach. So we can see that Pereira is a little bit older, and he also has a bit of a size and a bit of a reach advantage over Rountree, which is a pretty big deal, because Pereira is already someone that very much knows how to use his length and his reach. So 3.5-inch reach advantage for someone like Pereira is nice to have. In terms of age, though, Pereira is very old for a champion, right? There's not many guys that become champions this late in their career. You get, obviously, one pop up every once in a while, like a Blachowicz. But generally speaking, this is a young man's game. So Pereira is a bit of an outlier in that sense. And there is a bit of there are a few things to consider with Pereira that aren't necessarily going to be a giant issue in this fight, but it's something very much to consider with Pereira, because at 37 years old, Pereira is at that stage in his career where he should be declining a lot from fight to fight. Yes, he's only had 13 pro MMA fights, but he's had a lot of kickboxing matches. If you take a look at his record, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33 pro kickboxing fights on top of 13 pro MMA fights, right? So in total, that's over 40 pro fights. So Pereira's got a lot of miles on the clock, and he's old as fuck. He's an old Brazilian with over 40 pro fights. I'd imagine he trains very hard. I imagine he's been in a lot of wars in kickboxing. So Alex Pereira is at the stage in his career where I do think his career will fall off a cliff because Father Time's undefeated. And what I can also tell you is that 37-year-old Brazilians that have over 40 pro fights on their record aren't usually very durable. If you look at the history of MMA and you look at all of these legendary Brazilian strikers like Vanderlei Silva, Maurício Shogun Rua, Anderson Silva, you even look at guys like Lyoto Machida, Glover Teixeira, what we notice about all these guys is that they're very durable in their 20s and in their early 30s, in the mid 30s, but then they lose that durability and become very fragile into their late 30s. With Pereira, it's kind of difficult to know where he's at because he's so technical and he's so good defensively that he doesn't get hit clean a lot. So we don't really know where his chin is at. But I do think it's a bit of a red flag that he was sent to the Shadow Realm by Israel Adesanya. Let's be real, Adesanya's not the heaviest hitter. He's also a middleweight. And Pereira was out in that fight, which is a bit of a red flag to me. So when you look at a guy like Pereira, I do think the big, and this comes back to how have I been able to make a profit betting on the UFC over such a long period of time, right? How have I been able to do this? One of the ways that I've been able to do this is just by focusing on what is true. Drowning out all the noise, drowning out all the bullshit, and just focusing on what is true. Because if you look at my comment section now, or if you go watch someone else's YouTube video, or if you, go, listen to the UFC hype machine, or you go on MMA Twitter this week, everyone's going to be talking about how incredible Pereira is, how scary he is, charmer, the big walkout, the cold-blooded stare down, all this shit, right? And everyone's going to get hyped up by his knockouts. They love his highlight reel. Everyone loves a knockout, blah, blah, blah. But I forget about all that stuff, and I just focus on what is true. I focus on his skills, I focus on where he's at in his career, and I focus on strong trends. What I know going into this fight is that 37-year-old Brazilians with over 40 pro fights usually can't take a punch very well. They're usually not very durable. Now, that doesn't mean that Pereira's chin definitely isn't good. He might be an outlier. He might be an exception to the rule. But just like the trend of betting against fighters like Carla Esparza who have announced their retirement, Carla could win this weekend, but over the long term, we know if we consistently bet on these strong trends, we will make money. Same goes for Pereira. He's old as fuck. He's had over 40 pro fights. These old Brazilians usually can't take a shot. And to be fair, Khalil Rountree hits pretty fucking hard. Now, Pereira obviously hits very hard as well, but it's just something to think about if you are thinking of throwing Pereira into your parlays or something this weekend. I wouldn't touch this guy. Yes, he's incredible. Yes, he's very dangerous. Yes, very scary. Yes, he probably beats Rountree. But in my opinion, there's very little upside to betting a guy like Pereira in this odds range at an implied probability of 83%. When he's like 150 years old, he's had 40 pro fights, tons of wars in the gym, probably been rocked, wobbled, dropped, and faced a bunch of head trauma throughout his career. And yeah, that's just how I see it. So, in terms of how these two match up stylistically, I don't think there's any point in talking about grappling. I doubt we're going to see any grappling in this fight. Neither of these guys ever goes for a takedown. Rountree actually referenced this in the presser this week, actually today, saying he's not going to try and take Pereira down. So it's going to be a stand-up fight. If this fight stays standing, something that I do think is interesting is obviously this fight is taking place at high altitude in Salt Lake City. And both these guys do have a history of slowing down in fights. If you look at Alex Pereira's first fight against Jerry Prohaska, he was definitely slowing down in the second round before he kind of just landed a flash knockout out of nowhere. And he was also slowing down in the Jan Blachowicz fight, although obviously the first round involved a lot of grappling with Blachowicz taking him down, and this fight was also at high altitude. So we have had a bit of a look at Pereira at high altitude. It didn't look good, to be fair. From the second round onwards, he was sloppy, slow hand speed. But what I do like about Pereira is that he does have experience fighting at high altitude. So he'll know exactly what to expect. He's fought here before, but he did look very sloppy in that second and third round against Blachowicz, and I actually scored the fight for Blachowicz. I thought it was a pretty bad decision. So Pereira's got a bit of a history of slowing, to be fair, which you'd expect for a big old Brazilian that hits that hard and is 6'4". He didn't slow in his first Adesanya fight in the UFC, which went 5 rounds, but that was because he barely did anything. It was such a slow pace, he didn't exert enough energy to actually slow. And what I would say about Rountree is he's had a history of slowing down in fights as well, although he didn't slow against Anthony Smith. He looked pretty good against Anthony Smith. So while he has slowed in his fights against Marcin Pratnio and Dustin Jacoby, perhaps his conditioning is better these days. However, whatever gains he's made to his conditioning may be undone by the high altitude climate of Salt Lake City. So just something to bear in mind. It's an additional layer of risk if you're thinking of betting the fight this week. Both these guys have a tendency to slow. And in terms of how they match up when it comes to striking, both guys have got devastating leg kicks. Pereira is definitely the better boxer. He's more accurate. He's got that sniper style, those deadly counters. I think he's better defensively than Rountree as well. But I would say Rountree's got a more dangerous kicking game just purely based on the volume. Pereira is a sniper with the kicks outside of the leg kicks. Obviously, he dropped Jiri with the head kick. But Rountree does a really good job of just blasting his opponents with a really diverse range of kicks, body kicks, leg kicks, everything. He throws a higher volume of kicks than Pereira. But both guys have a very nasty kicking game. Pereira is definitely the better boxer. Now, Rountree throws a higher volume than Pereira. Pereira more of a sniper, more selective with his shots. And yeah, you know, you've got to obviously pick Pereira to win this fight. He's the better boxer. You know, he's very accurate. I trust him to perform more than I do Rountree. He's got experience fighting at high altitude. But I feel his advantages are very much baked into the odds. There's just no upside in betting him here at all. If you really, really, really want to bet on this fight to make watching him more interesting, you've kind of got to take Rountree. Because you'd be crazy to bet on a 37-year-old Brazilian with over 40 pro fights in this odds range. It's just lunacy. Rountree's dangerous. He's got to be respected. So in terms of the over-under on this one, obviously very unlikely this fight goes to a decision. Both guys very dangerous. They've both got a history of slowing. They both have that killer instinct as well, but the odds reflect that. The over-under 1.5 rounds is interesting. Maybe they both show each other a lot of respect and the fight ticks over 1.5. My lean would be the under 1.5, but I don't feel that strongly either way. Certainly not strong enough to bet it. And if we take a look at the prop bets, we can see that Pereira winning by knockout or TKO is terrible odds. Rountree by knockout or TKO a lot better. Yeah, the props are a little bit dead on that fight for me. So I think it's time we moved on to the next one. So you guys saw the title of this video, the thumbnail of this video is Pennington Parlay. And we've already spoken about how Tecia Pennington is likely going to be a good bet this weekend against Carla Esparza, because Esparza has announced this her retirement fight. So what are we talking about when we talk about the Pennington Parlay? So on last week's card, UFC Paris, I had a bet on a 2-fight parlay accumulator bet on Taylor Lapillus. He's obviously already won. He beat Vince Morales last week. And also Raquel Pennington, which gave me odds of close to plus 100, just under. So just dead in that even money odds range, right? So The Pennington parlay that I'm considering on this one is, do I let that ride or do I hedge out? Because I do have some concerns with Raquel Pennington this week. And this is a real interesting fight. So if we look at our profitability chart, so obviously we've got the parlay on Lapillus and Pennington. I've been making money betting on the UFC for a very long time. You can see our pre-fight betting profitability chart is great. The way I've done this, and specifically the last 2 years where we've been able to make around 30 units of profit in the last 2 years, is by sticking to principles and not deviating from them. And I've found that whenever I have these dips or periods of break even, these periods have almost always come about as a result of me breaking my principles and mixing it up and placing bets that go against my principles. And the issue I have with the Pennington parlay, where we've obviously got, where are we? Mr. Lapillus and Pennington, is that to some degree I am breaking my own rules and principles if I do bet Pennington this week. But we've already got her at pretty good odds thanks to Mr. Lapillus. So do we just let it ride? We do have a lot of bets for this week's card. Do we just let it ride? Or do we hedge out? Pennington's saying all the right things in the fight week interviews as the presser. She's very, very motivated. She's hungry. She's ready to go. So let me know what you think. What I would really like you guys to do for me is watch this breakdown. Listen to everything I say and watch the footage that I show you. Because I'll show you a lot of footage to understand the reasons why I like Pennington in this fight. And then let me know what you think. Let me know if you think I should hedge out of this parlay, because we can obviously hedge out quite easily in profit thanks to Mr. Lapillus, or if you think I should let it ride. Let me know what you think. But I think it's time we get into explaining the reasons why I really like Pennington in this fight. So we'll take a look at the odds. Pennington is around about a 1.59 favourite at the moment, which is going to be minus 169 for an implied probability of 63%. If we take a look at the odds on Pena, she is around about an average of 2.35, which is going to be plus 135 for an implied probability of 43%. So we got our money in on Pennington, even money at the moment, thanks to Mr. Lapillus. Right? So how do these two match up from a stylistic point of view? Let's start off by taking a look at the tail of the tape. So Pennington is 36 years old, 5'7", with a 67.5 inch reach. Pena is 35 years old, 5'6", with a 69 inch reach. So both girls are about the same age and about the same size. Nothing too major there. The fight is obviously taking place at high altitude, but both these girls have built a career of having excellent cardio. So I don't think that is going to come into it. Pennington in particular has lived and trained in Denver, Colorado for a long time. So she's used to living and training and fighting at high altitude. So in terms of how these two match up from a stylistic point of view, the reason why I really like Raquel Pennington in this fight is because she is significantly better than Julianna Pena in every single aspect of MMA. But the problem with Pennington is that she has pretty bad fight IQ, doesn't fight with a sense of urgency, and quite often is quite passive and tentative. So when I say that Raquel Pennington from a technical point of view is significantly better than Pena in every single aspect of MMA, it's not quite the same as when I say that against. It's not quite the same as when I say that about Cavalcanti compared to Nora Cornell last week. Because we knew Cavalcanti was better than Cornell everywhere, but Cavalcanti also had the cardio edge. She had good fight IQ. With Pennington, she is technically better than Pena everywhere, but she doesn't have better fight IQ. That's one area that Pena excels. Pena is one of these fighters that is very low level from a technical point of view, very limited from a technical point of view, but she makes up for it with heart, work rate, cardio, output, and intelligence. She makes the best of what she's got, whereas Pennington quite often makes life hard for herself. So, if this fight stays standing, Pennington has a big advantage. Not only is she better defensively than Pena, but she's more durable, she's more technical, and she hits harder. If this fight stays standing, which it probably won't because both these girls like to grapple, but if it does stay standing, then Pennington should outstrike Pena comfortably. My big issue with Pennington is that she quite often has long periods of inactivity where she doesn't throw a lot of strikes, doesn't pull the trigger as much as I'd like, and as a result allows rounds to be closer than they need to be. But there's no doubt that Pennington is the better striker than Pena if she lets her hands go. And I also wonder if Pena is starting to lose her chin a little bit, because she was dropped very easily multiple times against Amanda Nunes. Now, I know Nunes hits very hard, but Pena was going down very easily off like glancing shots that weren't particularly hard, which is always a bit of a red flag, because, you know, Pena is at that stage in her career where she could be starting to decline from fight to fight and lose a bit of that durability. So, when it comes to grappling, Pena's obviously built a career off grappling, right? We know her striking is very low level. It's no surprise to anyone that Pennington is the better striker. And if you were to look at this fight on paper, on surface level, you would call this a classic striker versus grappler matchup where Pena's the grappler and Pennington's the striker. But one of the reasons why I really like Pennington in this fight is I actually think Pennington's the better grappler too. And I want to show you some footage to help you understand the reasons why. So the thing about Pena is she's one of these fighters that is very aggressive from top position, but she's not a particularly good offensive wrestler. And even though she's heavy from top position, she's got good grappling control. She struggles to get her opponents down. And a big flaw in Pena is that her own takedown defense is very, very bad. And she's very weak off her back. So Pena is one of these fighters that if you take her down and get on her back, you can hold her down very, very easily. Now, Pennington, on the other hand, is a lot more difficult to take down and hold down. So Pena's takedown defense ground game is a lot better. Pena's got good grappling control. And if Pena does get on top of... if Pennington does get on top of Pena, I think she'll be able to hold her down and rack up a lot of control. So we're going to show a couple fights here of Pena's, just to kind of show you how big the issues are with her takedown defense and ground game. So if we skip through, Nunes really starts to go to her grappling in the third round. So what I want you to pay attention to is just how easily Pena goes down, and then what she does when she's on her back. So if we hit play, this is the third round, and we can see that Nunes just easily trips Pena to the ground. Now this is with about 3 minutes left to go in round 3. And if we just skim through, what I want you to pay attention to is that Nunes gives Pena a lot of space from top position and a lot of opportunities to work back up to her feet. But Pena doesn't really take them. Like here you can see, in a moment, Nunes starts to posture up here and land ground and pound from top position. Now Nunes doesn't really have anything here. She's giving Pena tons of space, but Pena stays on her back. She doesn't use that space to try and scramble back up to her feet. She just accepts being on the bottom. And this is something you see play out over and over again in Pena's fights. So there's 2.5 minutes left to go in the round, and if we just skip through, You can see she just stays in close guard and is very, very weak off her back. Doesn't really make any attempt to get back up to her feet. Here's another situation where she's created space for herself off her back with this arm bar. She should be trying to use this space to get back up. She doesn't. She stays on her back. And inevitably, Nunes is going to slip that arm out and end up back on top. And you see she's taken down in the third round there and then just spends the rest of the round on the bottom. So take a look at this. Round 4 now from Nunes. And again, watch how easily Pena goes down. Practically just falls to the ground. So this is 4 minutes 45 left to go in the round. Now here she's not in as bad of a position. In the last round, she was taken down out in the middle of the octagon where she didn't have the cage as a base that she could use to wall walk back up to her feet. So here she's been taken down relatively close to the cage. So she's got the opportunity to try and get her back tight to the cage, to work, to move, to get her back tight to the cage, to wall walk. But as you can see again, she just stays on her back, hunting for long shot arm bars and shit off her back. Every time she creates a bit of space for herself off her back, like here, she doesn't try and scramble over to the cage to wall walk back up. She just stays on her back and allows Nunes to just basically keep top position. And every time she creates space for herself off her back with these arm bars, she doesn't get it and just ends up on the bottom again. And at this point, she's been on the ground for, 2 minutes. Now, some people will say, oh, it's Amanda Nunes, she's the greatest female fighter of all time, blah, blah, blah. But that doesn't mean anything to me. When I'm assessing a fighter and I'm researching a fight, I'm looking at the decisions they make and the skills that they demonstrate. Amanda Nunes being the best fighter in the world, or Catwoman, or, the green girl out of fucking Guardians of the Galaxy, it doesn't mean anything. I want to look at Pena's decision making. Is Pena's decision making correct? And it isn't, because when she's getting space off her back to scramble back up to her feet, she's not taking it. And when she's close enough to the cage to wall walk, she's not trying. So I don't care if she's fighting the green girl out of Guardians of the Galaxy, the blue girl from Guardians of the Galaxy, fucking Harley Quinn. I don't care who it is. When fighters are in this position, I want to see them scramble back up to their feet. I don't want to see them lying on their back, doing a whole lot of nothing. You can just see these takedowns that Pena's giving up, right? Here's another one coming. Look how easily she goes down. Just practically falls to the ground, right? She's channeling her inner Alexa Grasso. Here's another takedown here. Kind of tried to pull guard on a guillotine attempt. Gets taken down again here. Just no takedown defense at all. Right? So yes, Nunes is one of the best female fighters of all time. But these are weak ass takedowns that Pena's giving up. And she's been like this throughout her whole career. We'll quickly skim through another fight. Sarah McMahon. Now I know Sarah McMahon is a former Olympic level wrestler. But again, comes down to decision making. Right? Comes down to decision making. Right, look at how easily Pena goes down there. Very, very bad takedown defense. And McMahon, there Pena showed a bit of urgency to get back up, which is nice. But her takedown defense is so bad that McMahon can just get her back down easily. You see there. I feel I've made my point. She's very, very bad on the ground. So, this is one of those fights where we've got our money in a strong position thanks to Taylor Lapalus last week. And this is a very, very good stylistic matchup for Raquel Pennington. This is one of those fights where it really is Pennington's fight to lose. She has a clear advantage when it comes to striking. And with how bad Pena's takedown defense is, Pennington can get takedowns and rack up a lot of control from top position. The only issue with Pennington is her fight IQ and the fact that she's passive and tentative and sometimes struggles to put her stamp on rounds because she holds back a lot and allows fights to be closer than they need to be. But from a technical point of view, there is absolutely no question that she has the advantage over Pena everywhere. She's probably more durable as well. She definitely hits harder. So, what do you guys think I should do? Should we let this parlay ride? Should we let the Pennington Lapalus parlay ride? Or should we hedge out? because we're worried about Pennington's fight IQ. I don't usually bet on fighters with bad fight IQ, so this one is outside of my comfort zone. But Pennington is better than is simply better than Pena everywhere. So let me know what you think I should do. Let me know, guys. Should we hedge out? Should we let it ride? Let me know what you think. So in terms of the over-under on this one, very likely the fight goes to a decision. Both girls are absolute decisionators. Both these girls frequently go deep in fights. They're both also tough as nails and very well-rounded. Neither of them are that dangerous either. As you can see, Pena goes deep very, very often. And Pennington is an absolute decision machine. So very likely that this fight goes to a decision. What I will say, though, the odds are a bit steep. 5 rounds is a long time in the octagon. I don't think there's that much upside in betting fight goes to a decision at very steep odds at an implied probability of about 70%. So if you really want to bet the over-under, the under probably gives you the better risk to reward ratio, but I would be surprised if the fight did end inside the distance. In terms of the props, the only one I would be interested in would be Pennington by decision, but the odds aren't that much better from a percentage point of view compared to a money line odds when you consider all the extra risk you're taking on by betting on Pennington to win by decision. So if you really want to bet this fight, I would just take Pennington straight. And obviously I haven't taken Pennington straight. I've parlayed her with Lapillus. But hopefully, you know, if we do let the bet ride, she comes through for us. Let me know what you think I should do. Let me know. As well as letting me know why you think I should call this little guy. I love the name Rampage. I think the name Rampage is great. Let me know what you think. What should I call this little guy? We pick him up in 3 weeks' time. October 30th. I can't wait. Okay. Now, let's break down the next fight on this card, which is going to be Mario Bautista versus Jose Aldo. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Jose Aldo is the slight underdog at average odds of about 2.17, which is going to be plus 117 for an implied probability of 46%. If we take a look at the odds on Bautista, he's around an average of 1.7, which is going to be minus 143 for an implied probability of 59%. So Bautista is 31 years old, 5'9" with a 69-inch reach, and Aldo, 38 years old, 5'7" with a 70-inch reach. So we can see that, first of all, there is a huge age gap in this fight, with Bautista being 7 years younger than Aldo. Statistically, the younger fighter wins around 65% of the time when there's a 7-year age gap in a fight. And obviously, that stat is an average of all age gaps. So it includes when a 23-year-old fights a 30-year-old, when a 34-year-old fights a 27-year-old. And so we know that that statistic is more meaningful when you've got fighters at certain stages of their careers. And in the context of this fight, the stat is very meaningful, very powerful, because at 38 years old, Aldo is at that stage in his career where you'd expect him to be declining significantly from fight to fight. Not only that, but Aldo and Bautista are obviously bantamweights, and we know that the lighter weight classes are all about speed, reflexes and athleticism. So 38 years old for a bantamweight is like probably mid-40s in the heavier weight classes, because, you know, fighters in the lighter weight classes tend to decline earlier in their careers than the heavier weight classes. So Aldo is ancient for a bantamweight, and while he did look reasonably good in his last fight against Jonathan Martinez, you know, you've got to be expecting this guy's career, his athletic performance, to fall off a cliff, because even performance-enhancing drugs can't cheat Father Time forever. And I'm not saying Aldo is on performance-enhancing drugs or anything like that. He might be. I have a feeling he is based on his Martinez performance. But anyway, at 38 years old, you know he's on borrowed time. And so this is one of those matchups where that age stat is really meaningful, because what that age stat is supposed to show is that when you've got guys in the tail end of their career fighting guys in their prime, the guys in the tail end of their career lose quite often. And so Bautista at 31 years old, he's in his prime, he's getting better from fight to fight, he's a cardio machine, he's very tough, he's very durable, he's very well rounded. Purely based on that stat alone, Bautista is very interesting to me. this weekend. Another reason why Bautista is very interesting to me is obviously this fight is taking place at high altitude in Salt Lake City. We've already said Bautista is a cardio machine, and we know Aldo isn't. So Aldo, similar to Alex Pereira in many ways, is a very high level, very technical striker, but he doesn't throw a particularly high volume of strikes in order to pace himself. So Aldo's one of these guys that focuses on staying in a defensive shell, picking his shots, taking that sniper approach to striking like Alex Pereira does, and hoping that his sniper style, his power, his accuracy, his technique puts his opponents into a defensive shell and makes them reluctant to attack him so that he can control the pace of the fight and he only exerts as much energy as he's comfortable exerting. The guys that have given Aldo problems in the past, the guys that don't respect his deterrent, and they basically take the fight to him, force him to engage, and they force him to fight at their pace, not his. And so what's interesting about this matchup is Bautista is one of these gritty, blue-collar, industrious fighters who isn't particularly good at anything, but his strength is in his toughness, his cardio, his work rate, his output. So while from a technical point of view, he can't match Aldo's striking or grappling, what Bautista can do is come forward, engage Aldo, force him to work, and take him out of his comfort zone. Now that's obviously a dangerous game to play because early in the fight, when Aldo's fresh, we know he is an absolute sniper and he won't take a backward step. The thing about Aldo is he's the kind of guy that'll go out on his sword. If you take the fight to him, he will stand his ground and he will fire back. And if he adrenaline dumps and gasses out as a result, that's just the way it is. That's the kind of guy he is. You know, he's not going to try and circle away from you and pace himself. If you want a firefight, he'll give it to you. And so that's where the danger comes in for Bautista, because Bautista's not the best defensively. He has been dropped a good number of times in his UFC fights. He doesn't really have much power in his hands to get respect in there from Aldo. And early in this fight, Bautista likely will get lit up and outstruck bad because he's nowhere near the level of striker that Aldo is. But, just like I said about Alex Pereira, the way you can make money in this game and where I talk about, I want to share more of how I've been able to make a profit betting on the UFC for so long. I just want to talk more about the theory behind the way I do things, the principles behind the way I do, or the principles behind why we're able to consistently get our money into very strong positions. And one of those principles is not believing the hype, not listening to what people say online, and just focusing on what is true. 38-year-old Brazilians in the bantamweight division are usually in the tail end of their career and declining very hard from fight to fight. And they usually struggle when they face young, hungry bulls like Bautista. Like Alex Pereira, right? He's not facing a young, hungry bull. But 37-year-old Brazilian light heavyweights with over 40 pro fights usually aren't that durable. We focus on things that are true, strong trends that we know to be true. So if I'm looking at this fight and I look at it, from a stylistic point of view, it's kind of a bad stylistic matchup for Bautista because he doesn't have the wrestling to take Aldo down. Aldo has some of the best takedown defense in the history of the sport. And he doesn't have the striking to outstrike Aldo. However, the fact this fight is at high altitude, and Aldo does have a history of slowing if you don't allow him to control the pace, and the fact Aldo's so old makes me think this one's very interesting. So the way I would look at this fight is, if you're going to bet it, I would take Bautista. I would not overthink this one. I would not be thinking Aldo's an incredible striker, impossible to take down. I would be thinking, how often do 38-year-old Brazilians with a history of slowing beat tough, well-rounded cardio machines at high altitude? The answer to that question is not very often. Now, Aldo's obviously one of the greatest of all time, but like we always see with the fighters who are the greatest of all time, the Anderson Silvas, the George St. Pierre's, the curtain does close on their career. And 38-year-old Aldo's not the same as 28-year-old Aldo. So, if you really want to bet this fight this weekend, I would take Bautista. Now, I've already got a lot of bets for this weekend, so I'm not going to take Bautista just because I think Aldo is probably good enough to still win the first 2 rounds and then kind of survive in the third when Bautista pours it on if the fight does go that long. I don't see too much value in Bautista's odds, but my pick would definitely be Bautista on this one. Just not overthinking it and playing the age, playing the altitude. I think this is a tough fight for Aldo in a lot of ways. But let me know what you think. So if we take a look at the over-under on this one, I do think it's very likely this fight goes deep. Bautista, tough as nails, very difficult to finish. He's also not that dangerous offensively. Aldo's turned into a bit of a decisionator over the last few years. The odds are very steep, though, on the fight to go to a decision. What I would say is Bautista does get rocked, wobbled, and dropped quite a lot. He even got dropped by Ricky Simone, which is quite surprising because Simone obviously doesn't have any power in his hands. So if you do want to bet the over-under on this one, I do think you're better off taking the under. Because, I mean, the odds on the fight to go to a decision are just shit. So this is going to give you a better risk-to-reward ratio. But it is more likely to go to a decision, so I wouldn't bet that personally. In terms of props, Bautista by decision, the odds are too steep on that for me. The odds on Aldo by knockout or TKO aren't bad, to be fair, because like I say, Bautista does get dropped a lot. But I don't really like any of the props on that one. Let's move on to breaking down the next fight. So, now let's break down the fight between Ketlen Vieira and Kayla Harrison. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Kayla is the favourite at average odds of about 1.09, which is going to be minus 1,111 for an implied probability of 92%. And if we take a look at the odds on Vieira, she is around an average of, say, 7.75, which is going to be plus 675 for an implied probability of 13%. I'm having to say very big numbers in this breakdown, which I don't ever usually say. So, Vieira, 33 years old, 5'8", with a 68-inch reach. Harrison, 34 years old, 5'8", with a 66-inch reach. This is a very, very interesting fight indeed. A very, very interesting fight. Let's pull up some stats. Let us pull up some stats on this matchup. So, okay, this is an interesting one. Now, what I am going to do for this fight is play you some footage in the background while I break this one down. But fundamentally, before we do that, we just have to make a few things clear. This is a classic striker versus grappler matchup. If the fight goes to the ground, Harrison will have a huge advantage. If the fight stays standing, Vieira will have a pretty big advantage. What I will say about Vieira, though, is she suffers from the same sort of problem Raquel Pennington does, is that she is passive at times. Even though she's a better striker than Harrison, she's one of these fighters that quite often makes fights closer than they need to be because she just doesn't do a lot at times. She's got pretty bad fight IQ, doesn't fight with a sense of urgency. Having said that, Kayla Harrison's striking is very, very, very low level, very bad. So if Vieira shows up this weekend and wants to make a name for herself, she could cause Harrison a lot of problems on the feet. Now, we want to show a bit of footage in this one. For the reason of highlighting how crazy these odds are. So before we show the footage, because I don't want to flick back and forth off the tab a lot because it's harder to edit. Obviously, if you know, I just want to keep the fight up once it's up. It'll be easier for me. But I want you guys to look at a stat. Now, stats don't tell the whole story of fights, right? Stats are only as useful as they are interpreted, right? But Ketlen Vieira's takedown defense is 92%. And her takedown offense is pretty good. And one of the reasons why it's very good is she trained for a long time at Nova União. So if you guys are familiar with Nova União, Andre Pederneiras, the head coach, you'll know that Nova União fighters are very famous for having incredible takedown defense. Hakron Diaz, Jose Aldo, Reynan Barao. All these guys are almost impossible to take down. And Vieira is very, very difficult to take down as well. I'm not saying her takedown offense is as good as Jose Aldo or Reina Barao, but she's pretty difficult to take down, which does make this fight interesting. What I will say about Vieira is, if you do get her down, she's very weak on her back. So if Kayla does get takedowns in this fight, she'll be able to smash Vieira from top position like she smashed Holly home. But it may not be easy for Harrison to get this fight to the ground. Typically, Nova União fighters are pretty difficult to get down. So now what I want to do is play you footage of this fight and talk to you about why these odds are a little bit wacky. So Harrison, at an implied probability of 92%, means that she's got virtually no way to lose this fight in the eyes of the bookies, the betting public, the betting market, whatever you want to call it. So what I want you to do is keep an eye on Kayla Harrison here. This is the second round of her fight against Larissa Pacheco. So bear in mind, the fight this weekend is at high altitude in Salt Lake City. So we know that high altitude climates have a big negative impact on a fighter's cardio, right? Fighters are much more likely to gas and slow down when they fight at high altitude. So if you look at Harrison's fight here against Pacheco, she started to gas in this round, in the second round, when she couldn't get Pacheco down easily and control Pacheco that easily from top position. So a big part of this breakdown is just going to be watching this second round play out. I'm just going to watch it with you guys. I don't have a lot else to say about this fight other than what you're going to see in front of you. But I just want you to pay attention to the body language, the breathing patterns of Harrison, and how much she slows here. Because from my perspective, if Harrison is slowing this badly after like 6 or 7 minutes in the PFL, and I believe this fight was at sea level. Let me just fact check that. Just checking in case this was actually at high altitude. So it was in New York. It was in New York. But point being, Harrison slows quite a lot in this fight. So if she's slowing down after 6 or 7 minutes in New York, imagine how quick she might slow down at high altitude in Salt Lake City. And so this is one of those fights where if Vieira can keep the fight standing, because we know Vieira has got very good cardio, this one could get real interesting. Like, I'll skip ahead until they disengage from this clinch position. But here we go. This is what I want you to pay attention to. So as they disengage with 2 minutes left to go in round 2, just pay attention to how tired she looks. Shaking her arms out by her side. You can see her arms are heavy and tired. How flat-footed she is. Mouth's open wide. There's a real flatness to everything that she does. And this is round 2. Look, she's trying to avoid engaging. Look how slow her hand speed is. She takes a big deep breath after that double jab. She's very tired here. Now imagine how much worse she would look if this fight were at high altitude. She's trying to catch her breath here. Throws a right hook. Look, she's looking up at the clock. She's looking up at the clock. She threw that right hook, immediately looked up at that clock. She's throwing a double jab and taking deep breaths. She's throwing a right hook and showing... she's throwing a right hook and taking a deep breath and looking up at the clock. Kayla's clearly very tired here. And we're literally only, 6, 7, 8 minutes in. And so this is just something to keep an eye on for me. Her wrestling looks much flatter here. If Vieira can keep this fight standing, this one gets very, 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 very interesting. And Vieira isn't easy to take down. I think Harrison might gas out trying to take her down. So I just wanted to play you that. I find it very, very interesting. And that's pretty much my breakdown. I think this one could get interesting. That's all I'm saying. Now, I'm not going to bet Vieira this weekend because she is very weak on the ground. If Harrison does get her down and get into top position, Vieira is going to struggle. I also have my suspicions that Kayla Harrison may be on performance-enhancing drugs because she looked significantly better against Holly Holm in her debut than she did in her PFL fights. I'm not accusing Kayla of anything. All I'm saying is her body looks very different in the UFC to how it looked in PFL. She also had a lot more energy in the Holly Holm fight as well, a lot more physically imposing in those grappling positions. But I do think these odds are very wide. And if you like the gamble, I don't think Vieira is a terrible gamble this weekend. I wouldn't be surprised if the altitude wreaks havoc on Kayla. She's got big old muscles, and if she can't get Vieira out of there early, those big old muscles are going to need a lot of oxygen to fuel. And in Salt Lake City, there ain't a lot of oxygen. So in terms of the over-under on this one, I do think it's quite likely this fight goes to a decision. Vieira is not the easiest to take down. She can defend herself on the ground. The high-altitude climate will mean, you know, Kayla shouldn't be as physically imposing and devastating on the ground as she was against Holly Holm. So my lean is more on this fight going deep. But Kayla's also very aggressive in pursuing the finish, so it's dangerous to play that. In terms of prop bets on this one, Vieira by decision is not as good as I thought it would be. There's no point in betting that. In percentage terms, it's not that much better than taking Vieira money line. So the odds are a bit dead on that. I thought the odds on Vieira by decision might be a lot better than that. So yeah, I hope you found that breakdown useful. Do find the odds on this one super duper duper interesting. And as a result, yeah, I'm interested to see how Kayla looks this weekend. Vieira's not a terrible stylistic matchup for her, but there are things Vieira does well that could pose Kayla problems. So now let's break down the fight between Kevin Holland and Roman Dolidze. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Holland is the favourite. Average odds of about 1.67, which is going to be minus 149 for an implied probability of 60%. And if we take a look at the odds on Dolidze, he is around an average of 2.20, which is going to be plus 120 for an implied probability of 45%. And as you will know, I have bet Kevin Holland this weekend, which will probably bite me in the ass because, again, every time I bet a fighter with bad fight IQ, it comes back to haunt me. But I do think Kevin Holland is a very good bet in this odds range for all the reasons that I will explain in this breakdown. It takes a lot to get me to bet a guy like Kevin Holland. I don't typically bet guys with bad fight IQ, but I just think this is a very bad stylistic matchup for Dolidze for the reasons I will explain. So Dolidze is 36 years old, 6'2", with a 76-inch reach, and Holland is 31 years old, 6'3", with an 81-inch reach. So straight away, there are quite a few X factors to talk about in this one. The first one being age. At 31 years old, Kevin Holland is in his prime. He should be getting better and better from fight to fight. Dolidze, 36 years old, is getting pretty old. He should be declining from fight to fight. Now, he hasn't got tons of fights. 16 pro fights is not a lot. But Dolidze, I wouldn't expect Dolidze to be getting better at this stage in his career. He should be declining. At the very least, he will be plateauing. So the version that we get from Dolidze on Saturday night should be very different to what we've seen in the past. But at 31 years old, Holland could look better than ever, show up with new tricks, new skills we haven't seen from him before. On top of that, this fight is also back in the middleweight division, which I think is brilliant. Kevin Holland just didn't look right to me at welterweight. He was way too skinny. His legs were way too skinny. He didn't have any power in his hands. He lost all his power. He looks way better at middleweight. I never really understood why he dropped down to welterweight in the first place because, the talent pool at welterweight is much deeper. At middleweight, I think Kevin Holland can go further because at middleweight, the talent pool is lighter. So I love this move back up to middleweight. And for me, Holland looks far healthier. He hits far harder. He moves much better in the middleweight division. This is a very good move for Holland. He's got a bit of a reach advantage, a very nice 5-inch reach advantage over Dolidze, which is a big deal because Dolidze's striking defense isn't great, and Holland does fight long and he knows how to use the length. For me, the biggest X factor of all, though, and the thing that really pushed me into betting Kevin Holland this weekend, is that this fight is taking place at high altitude, and we know that Kevin Holland is a cardio machine. Holland is the kind of guy that can go hard for 3 rounds, no problem. Never even seen this guy breathing heavy, whereas Dolidze slows down in every fight. Dolidze slows in fights at sea level, so if he's slowing down in fights at sea level, the high altitude climate could really wreak havoc on a guy like Dolidze. And this is the main reason why I like Holland in this fight. There are things that Dolidze could do to cause Holland problems, but I think by the second half of this fight, Dolidze will be too tired to do them, which is why I think Holland in this odds range is a great bet. Yes, we know Holland has got bad fight IQ. He fucks around a lot. He makes fights closer than they need to be. But if he shows up and performs anywhere near to his full potential in this one, I think this will be one of the easiest fights of Holland's UFC career. I just don't think Dolidze is going to do very well in the high altitude climate. And I want to show you some footage of Dolidze to understand why. We will start off by taking a look at his last fight against Anthony Smith. Now, I know that he took this fight on short notice in the light heavyweight division, so we can't be too harsh on him. However, you're only as good as your last fight. Your last fight gives us the best indicator of what to see from you in the future. And also, a lot of his fights over the last few years have ended inside the distance, so we want to be taking a look at the matchups that did go to a decision, because you know they're going to give us obviously a good look at his cardio. You know, these fights were a very long time ago. He did slow in these fights, but these fights give us a much more accurate representation of what to expect from him. So if we just start up the third round, and this fight was taking place in Vegas, so no high altitude climate here. I just wanted to pay attention to how sloppy Dolidze looks in this third round. So slow hand speed, mouth open wide, just pretty sloppy. And again, I don't want to be too harsh on Dolidze because, you know, ultimately he took the fight on short notice in a weight class above the weight class that he usually fights in. But he did look tired, did look flat in this third round. And we know Holland is an absolute cardio machine that can really put it on Dolidze and punish him if he does start to get tired and slow. We also know that Holland does great work with his body kicks, which will accelerate the rate at which Roman slows if Holland starts going to those body kicks early. You can see just Dolidze's mouth open wide, looking pretty tired, slow hand speed. We'll skip ahead a bit. And again, this is in the third round of the fight, right? But similar logic with the Kayla Harrison situation. If Dolidze is looking tired like this in the third round at sea level, he's quite likely to slow majorly in the second round of this fight. You see what I'm saying? Like, if you slow at sea level, you're going to slow sooner in the fight at high altitude. And you can see Dolidze just tired in this fight, right? Maybe we won't spend too much time on it because obviously he did take it on short notice, but you can see slow hand speed, mouth open wide, looking real sloppy. A sniper like Kevin Holland will light this guy up, in my opinion, you know, if he starts to get tired. But like I say, he took it on short notice. So now let's take a look at his fight against Nassourdine Imavov, which was, of course, in the Apex. Let's take a look. This was in the Apex, I believe. Just double check. Yeah, it was in the Apex. So again, what we're going to do, go to the second round. Now, Dolidze did take damage in this fight. So we're going to go to... We're going to try and avoid the clinch bits, because when they're out in the middle of the octagon, you'll see what his body language and everything is like. So when they disengage here, just pay attention to his footwork, his movement, his hand speed. Right? Just sloppy, slow hand speed. right? And we're talking about cardio, right? So we want to go to the second half of the fight. All right, they go back to the clinch. You might get to see a bit of it towards the end of this round. He just reaches a lot with those punches. His hand speed is very slow. Like, very sloppy. You can imagine if he gets tired, Kevin Holland will just light him up when he's this sloppy on the feet. And then if we go into round 3, what you see from him in the Anthony Smith and the third round of the Anthony Smith fight and the third round of this Imavov fight is his volume really dips by the third round. His hand speed is very slow, where you see him just wailing on and loading up on a lot of big overhand rights and stuff like that. And his mouth's open wide, his footwork is kind of flat. You can see that he just definitely slows. And the result of that is that he's very sloppy in kickboxing range. He just reaches a lot with that right hand. You see his mouth is open wide. Volume low. I just think at high altitude, man, with how busy Holland can be, how accurate he can be, how he uses his length, the volume of strikes that he throws, I just see this as being one of those fights where Dolidze will probably become a sitting duck at some point in this fight, and then Holland can rack up major volume on him and do big damage. I just don't think Dolidze is going to be able to match Holland's volume, because he can't match his cardio. And I think Dolidze's striking defense is going to get him into a lot of trouble against a guy like Holland. As you can also see, Dolidze's offensive wrestling isn't good. All of his takedowns come above hip height. So while Dolidze will have an advantage over Holland on the ground, his offensive wrestling is not the best. And you can kind of see it in this round, where every time he tries to take Imavov down, it's above hip height. He's not getting in on the legs. He's not trying to upset Imavov's balance or hit trips or throws or anything like that. Everything's above hip height. He's very stiff. So I do think Holland is a good bet. If this were at sea level, I would probably pass. But at high altitude, that is a sweetener for taking a cardio machine like Holland against a guy like this. And so, obviously, based on what we've just seen, that footage there, it's quite clear that Holland will have a big advantage when it comes to striking. But Holland's biggest weakness has always been his ground game, right? His takedown defense isn't great. He's quite weak off his back. But the thing about Dolidze is his offensive wrestling isn't great. He doesn't tend to have much success with his wrestling. And we kind of saw that in that footage of the Imavov fight, where his takedowns are coming very high up above the hips of Imavov, struggling to upset Imavov's balance. But if you look at the stats, they also kind of reflect that. So Dolidze's takedown accuracy is only 40%. But a lot of the success that Dolidze had taking guys down came in his early fights. He's kind of abandoned his wrestling in recent years, and I don't know if that's because he doesn't have the cardio to grapple hard, so he just prefers to stand and bang. But if you look at the stats, obviously we know Anthony Smith has really bad takedown defense. Dolidze attempted 3 takedowns, he only got 1 of them. If we look at the Imavov fight, he attempted 4 takedowns, he didn't get any. The Vettori fight, only 1 takedown, didn't get it. Hermanson didn't attempt any takedowns. Phil Hawes, no takedowns. Dorcas, 17 takedown attempts in that fight. Staropoli, 9 takedowns, got half of them. Trevin Giles, 3 takedowns, John Allen, 5 takedowns. Ibragimov, no takedowns. So he's one of these guys that earlier in his career he grappled a lot, but he's somewhat abandoned it in recent years. And I think the danger for Dolidze in this fight is when we have seen him grapple a lot in the past, he does gas himself out pretty quick. So he's in kind of a tricky situation here where if he tries to grapple a lot with Holland, he very much risks burning himself out and then being an even bigger sitting duck on the feet. Like I say, if this fight were at sea level, I would probably pass. But the fact that it's at high altitude makes me like Kevin Holland a lot in this matchup. So if we take a look at the over-under on this one, I think it's quite likely this fight goes deep. We already talked about the key for Holland winning being to drag him into deep water where he can make Dolidze pay for probably slowing down. But the thing is, Dolidze was dropped by Imavov. He's bad defensively. We know Holland can be aggressive. If Holland really goes for it on Saturday night, I think he could actually knock Dolidze out. I feel it has been a while since we had a big highlight reel knockout from from Holland. But I feel we might get one this weekend with how bad Dolidze is defensively and how much he's likely to slow at high altitude. So in terms of the props, the odds on Holland to win by knockout at TKO are pretty steep. I don't like that. But Holland to win in round 3 is quite interesting. Now, obviously, there's a big odds spread, so I wouldn't like it as much at 9.0 as I would 17.0. But if you can get Holland to win in round 3 at really juicy odds, I would consider that. Because even though that bet doesn't win a super high percentage of the time, you won't need it to in order to turn a long-term profit. And I think there's a good chance Holland gets the win in round 3 based on the fact that Dolidze slows down a lot as fights were on at sea level. This fight's at high altitude, and Holland is a cardio machine that can really put it on him for 3 rounds. So, I hope you found that breakdown useful. If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Let me know what you think of my bets this week. I've got quite a lot of bets this week. I've got even more on my website. And hopefully they come through for us. Hopefully we can make some money. Hopefully you have a good weekend. Check out my website, MMABettingTips.com. Join my live betting group. You'd absolutely love it. And with that, see you next week, guys. Take care, everyone. Love you all. Bye.